Hello, and thank you very much for tuning in to the podcast series by the New Silk Road Project. I'm your host today, Charles Stevens, the founder of the New Silk Road Project. This series is dedicated to understanding and raising awareness of one of the most important development strategies of the 21st century, China's Belt and Road Initiative. The centerpiece of the New Silk Road Project, an initiative supported by JEEP, CSIS, Magellan Capital, the University of St Andrews and Shira, was to travel the course of the Silk Road economic belt from London to Yiwu in eastern China, interviewing the key actors and academics along its course. We will have to apologise in advance for some of the tangential moments in this podcast series, and also the variable quality of audio footage. We do hope this series sheds important light into China's growing global presence and the significant changes taking place across Eurasia. As founder of the Polish New Silk Road Society, Andrez Filipowicz wants to show the Polish people the meaning of this initiative, but also doesn't want them to have too much expectation of this initiative. Our conversation was hosted in Warsaw, the capital of Poland, a country which is seen as a key strategic location along China's New Silk Road.
I'm a lawyer, a first-time scholar and lecturer in a university, actually in Warsaw University of Natural Science. I'm teaching intellectual property rights and business law. And as regards the interest in New Silk Road, it so started in 2015 when the Chinese initiative in Eastern Europe started to be more, let's say, visible and more significant than before. And these years were also the years of growing Chinese business investment in Poland. In 2016, for example, it was more than 500 million US dollars investment. Right now it's slightly slower, and but it started to be visible. And the whole initiative was very interesting for me and for my friends who created New Silk Road Society because we have had an impression that this initiative was only one important and global initiative, a real initiative on a global scale in the last 20 years. Something which can change the picture of a quite huge part of our globe. And what's more, the Chinese who started with this initiative seems to have enough money to really develop that and then create some very important things. We have seen the influence of this initiative on Poland from three different angles. One is a political one. It's sometimes this initiative is means something like more or less try to make a division in Eastern Europe and in the European Union as a whole, because the Chinese trying to differentiate the attitude to different European countries, but the other investors doing exactly the same. The problems with this initiative is that it was initiated by the pure communist country, which openly talking about ideology from, let's say, with its Marxist sources and which is strictly communist ideology, not very, let's say, welcome in Poland. And China or Chinese were not a popular nation in Poland. If you can, if you watch the ranking of the popularity, Chinese are very low. I think in other European countries it's similar feelings. For example, we have a difference between, for example, Vietnamese and Chinese, and we have a colony of, let's say, 30 or 40,000 Vietnamese in Poland. And the feeling is that they accommodate and they are closer to Polish culture than a Chinese colony, which is not so big. Well, the estimation is that there are about 10,000 Chinese people in Poland. And Poland is also not the first target of Chinese investment in Europe. As a matter of fact, comparison, for example, with main investor in Poland is showing that China is not very important. For example, in the last 20 years, China invested in Poland slightly more than 1 billion of USD. 100, something like that. And Germany in the same time invested 33 million USD. So that means that it's even not, it's a very visible and important proportion. And so from a political and economical point of view, it's not the investment and not influences are very important for us. There is something which is important in this initiative. Poland is lying in a center of Europe, and it could be a huge communication transportation hub, which is not because of mostly because of historical reasons. We have been divided, so the borders, for example, when the main boom of railroad building in the 19th century was, Polish railroads were fitted to the needs of different countries. So they finish not in the places when Poland right now needs this, but in the different borders which were cut in the center of the country. It is changing, and it was changing in the last century, but still the traces are visible. So for us, it's very important to have communication hubs and transportation hub, logistic, and so on. That, from this point of view, for us, this initiative could be very important, and it is. As a matter of fact, the Polish contribution to this initiative was to initiate it and started the trains, regular communication from center of Poland, which is still 100 kilometers from Poland, from Warsaw, up to Chengdu in Western China. So both countries welcomed this initiative, held this. As in my opinion, as far as I know, the Chinese finance still this transportation, as in the case of other transport and other railroad line to Western Europe. It's about right now, I think, about 18 days from center of Poland to Chengdu, and it's a simple and good communication. It is not as important as a maritime transport, but it's cheaper than air transport, and it's visible that it's growing all the time. So from this point of view, this initiative is important for Poland. From other point of view, I don't know. That's for us. It was a very important indication when last year, China took part in military maneuvers on Baltic Sea together with Russia. So it means that probably it was showing the solidarity with Russia, friendship to Russia, and so on. But they didn't take into consideration the reaction of Eastern European countries. It was very bad. And any kind of alliance between Russia and China seems for us very dangerous, and even if we don't believe in a reality of this friendship, because we always remember that Eastern Siberia is only one country which China didn't, except Taiwan, only one country which China didn't get back after 19th century. So, but it's a great politics which not always influences small movements on the ground. As a matter of fact, in China treated Eastern Europe as a kind of a block, which means that they made a mistake. We have no practical and great economic interest, for example, with Balkan countries. We have even no good communication with Hungary. As a matter of fact, from the Eastern European countries, for us the most important is Czech Republic and Slovakia, and to some extent Hungary and Romania, maybe Croatia, maybe Serbia, but not very. It's not a main source of trade and investment. And Poland is interesting in Western Europe, and our most important market is in Western Europe, and we are also one of the biggest source of export place of export for Western European countries. So from this point of view, we don't have a common interest simply with other Eastern European countries to stand, for example, opposite Union or opposite China or something like that. It's hard even to make any block. Even the Visegrad countries have not too much in common reality. Practically, the main country for us is Germany. As regards politics, probably United States and out of European Union, United States and Great Britain, and that's all. You can see that I'm speaking about Great Britain out of Union, so it's not true, of course.
Thank you. And would you be happy to talk a little bit about the aims of the Polish New Silk Road Society, and maybe a bit about your membership too?
We are trying to tell to the Polish people about the meaning of this initiative. We are showing some good and bad sides of it. Sometimes we are trying to explain that certain processes or certain ideas connected with that, and trying to talk about, let's say, expectation. We don't want we don't want the Polish people to have too much expectation from this initiative. And what's more, right now we are talking, for example, much about the effects of the initiative in some countries, like in African countries. It was very important. It's very important because attitude of Chinese business here is very, let's say, typical attitude of Chinese business everywhere. They do not change attitude from Africa to Europe, and they try to, for example, win here in tenders only with a price. They do not mix with Polish enterprises, do not making common businesses. They're trying to come in, give a credit and make something big. And that's the main target right now. And it's not a very good politics for Poland. No, we are not to make more debts. We are not willing to let Chinese companies to make investment on themselves only. And we have a bad experience with a Chinese company as regards, for example, road building, and it influenced the picture of the rest. So sometimes unjustified, but it's something like that.
Would you be happy to talk a little bit more about the rivalry between domestic Polish companies and Chinese companies, and how the government can succeed with partnering with BRI with this underlying tension on the ground?
You know, right now there are, as far as I know, 3 huge Chinese investment. The last one is probably the company, the factory which will make batteries for electric vehicles. And this is, of course, supported by Polish government because there's a huge program of a mobile electrical vehicles production and so on. So probably it is connected with this program. But this year, the Chinese company trying to win the tender for electrical power station in northern Poland, gave the lower price and they didn't win. They wanted to build that only with Chinese workforce and alone, and nobody liked it, and it's not. We have too many Polish construction companies which are looking for the job. So I think this type of attitude that the Chinese coming here, like let's say in Sri Lanka or somewhere, it's not a practical attitude.
And China has increasingly been acquiring Polish companies in the realm of automobile space and also innovation and technology too. How can Poland benefit in the long run from such acquisitions?
I think that as regards this electrical vehicles program, the profits could be visible in a few years. It could be China, it could be US or anyone else, but China is first because they have technology, they have money for that. And as regards the Polish, for example, technological company, there is some interest in China, but not as big as far as I know, not as big as for the, let's say, German companies of this type. There is other side of this story because in export China is export from Poland, China is on a very low position, but in the import is on a third place. And Poland trying to export to China, and they have the same problems like the rest of European countries. So There was even the initiative of European Union last month, probably, when 27 ambassadors from European Union presented to Chinese government a unified position about the necessity of opening the market and so on and so on. I'm talking with people who are responsible for the Polish investments in China, and they tell that it's a very complicated task, especially as regards export. And what's more, it's very hard as regards for example, food export, which is important for Polish agriculture. We took part and we lost a lot on Russia sanction. And the beginning, it seemed that we can, let's say, level that on with export to China, but right now the Polish agriculture export everywhere. Export to China growing, but it's very complicated task. It's hard. There are many barriers in the entrance. So, but it's more or less it's growing. And there's one thing which is very important in this initiative. It focused the interest of Polish people who thinking now not only about China but the rest of Asia and Eurasia, which lies between China and Poland. For us, it's as important as a China context. Central Asia, Caucasus, Iran also, because for example, Iran and Turkey was traditional Polish markets and very important for us. And when the infrastructure of different roads, because there's no one new Silk Road, if the infrastructure will be built, probably it helps us to cooperate more with Central Asia and Caucasus and South Asia as well.
And something you mentioned at the beginning was the importance of Poland's geographical position to the New Silk Road. With the sort of emergence of the southern corridor through Iran, some of the lower Central Asian states and Turkey, do you feel that this could diminish the importance of Poland?
No, because we're still building the infrastructure between Baltics and Balkans. And right now the new highway was started from Helsinki to Athens. It's a very important thing. Probably the new railroads are prepared to I think it's not so, because the Polish ports on the Baltic are convenient for export and for transport to Central and Southern Europe to some extent. Some connection between, for example, Gdańsk and Rijeka in Croatia, which are growing. Traditionally, Czechs are using the Szczecin port as a main source of main port for export on maritime route, and then that's something like that. And what's more, still the most convenient way is from Poland to Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, at the shorter way. We are very interested in building the convenient transportation road from Poland through Ukrainian Odessa port to Anaklia in Georgia, which is built right now, And through Georgia, Azerbaijan, it's only 800 kilometers to Baku, and through Caspian Sea to Kazakhstan. It's a shorter way, but much more complicated. When Ukrainians started to they started regular line, ferry line from Odessa to Batumi in Georgia. The first ferry was late for about a week because there was a storm on the sea and they must sail to Bulgaria and then back. So it's not very easy, but it's possible. Then when, for example, Hungarian and Serbian will build this new railroad with the Chinese help, probably the road to Istanbul will be shorter, and so on and so on. There are many such infrastructure moves which could make easy transportation and communication in the eastern part of Europe and western part of Asia.
And on the discussion of other nations, within the sea region and between 16 plus 1 nations, competition for Chinese investment has been increasing. How is Poland staying as one of the foremost investment opportunities for China?
As I told you, China is not a main source of Polish investments, first of all. Secondly, we are the biggest country in this part of Europe, over 39 million people. So, if you want to do something big, you must think about Poland. As regards infrastructure, we do not have so huge needs right now. We rebuilt our infrastructure with European money for a very big scale, and we still develop that. As regards ports, they traditionally were important, and Poland is not in a position to lose that. So that we are going to rebuild the ports and to invest in that. Poland invests also its own money, and I don't think that the situation like in Greece will happen, that we can sell the port, for example, like Piraeus. It's not possible in Poland. And same regard the railway line. There were some attempts, for example, of Chinese to talk with Polish governments about the taking over the railway line with this wide gauge line. We have one, which is from eastern border, Belarusian border to Katowice in Silesia. It's a very convenient line, as a matter of fact, because if you put it container on a train on this line, you don't need to change the wagon to practically to China border, and Chinese companies trying to talk with Polish government about buying this line, investing in that, rebuilding and so on, but this attempt failed and nobody will talk about it probably. Maybe it's some kind of joint venture, but not the simple transaction like in other countries. So we are in a better position simply because we are not very weak economically. We have some other sources of money and investment, and so we are in a good position because we can choose sometimes.
And local economists saw involvement with the Belt and Road Initiative as a way for Poland to try and galvanise its economy since 2013. Looking at the GDP growth, this doesn't seem to have really happened. And do you view this as a failure of your engagement with BRI, or how does this make you view it?
You know, as regards Polish GDP is growing all the time. It's unemployment is practically smallest in the last 30 years, and Belt and Road could be a kind of additional source of economical growth, but it's not a main factor which influences the Polish economy. And I think that's, so I don't think it's a factor of the biggest importance for us. It's fine to take part in this initiative, but it's not a decisive factor for us.
And looking a little bit more generally, what do you see as the greatest challenge to the Belt and Road Initiative in the next 5 years?
I think that ideological attitude, Chinese ideological attitude. If they want, they were talking about win-win situation, but victory means something else for them and something else for other people. Win-win situation will be when the initiative will be completely de-ideologized. Is it a good word in English? Something like that, yeah. Without ideology. If they want to I'm not. I don't believe that it's possible in economy and in politics to act without ideology. Or each country has its own. But when the Chinese try to gain the political influence based on this initiative, they will probably meet with let's say, everyone will try to stop them.
And in Poland, how have you found that public perception and awareness of the Belt and Road Initiative changed over the last 5 years?
Rather positive, but not very enthusiastic. Let's say, it's something like I told you that we know that it's not a decisive factor in our economy. It's important, but it's not a decisive factor. I have personally, probably not a very objective view because I'm talking too much with people about it. So usually the people are not expecting too much.
And finally, if you were going to summarize the Belt and Road Initiative in one word, what is that word for you?
One word, you mean? Oh, it's interesting. It's something like that.